So you've got neo and liberalism. So it's new liberalism. But
Mm.
what is liberalism then? And we've talked about this in the Anti-Capitalist podcast
Yes.
episode. We've talked about liberalism just generally a lot of the times because it's hard to describe capitalism, the current economic mode and philosophy, without mentioning liberalism. We talk about liberal democracies all the time as well. So by extension, liberalism in the political form, and then neoliberalism in the economic form is capitalism, neoliberalism. Oh, sorry, liberalism in the political form,
Yes.
liberal democracies, which is what we have around us today. And so neoliberalism is, yeah, an
Mm.
extension of those liberal ideals, but it's also a perversion of those liberal ideals, which is why I
Mm.
liked the way you described it before, being nefarious.
Mm.
So I would say then let's go back. So liberalism in and of itself,
Yeah.
a combination of the ideas coming from the Enlightenment and putting those ideas into practice and describing the world as they would have called it back in those times, political
Mm.
economy.
Yes.
So, which has transformed now into economics, which is the study of
Mm.
how society runs from a financial perspective,
Yeah.
and looking at trading and the movement of goods and services and the wealth of nations, as
Mm.
Adam Smith would have said it. And he's a prime liberal. He's really
Yes.
the poster boy, I guess you would say, for liberalism in the way that we understand it today, and the poster boy for capitalism.
Mm.
Although, interestingly enough, he did critique capitalism quite heavily.
Mm.
He wasn't just this sole advocate for it and said that it was just this wonderful thing and like everyone should just jump on board because it's the way of the future and stuff. He analyzed capitalism and critiqued the context and his time and his surroundings to try and offer, I guess, a picture of what he thought that it could really be in the truest liberal sense of the
Mm.
word. And so liberals, I would say, are very strong on one, freedom, and like you were saying before, freedom,
Yeah.
equality, and private property. Those are the
Mm.
ideals that make up that form of understanding of the world
Yes.
from a political, economic perspective.
Mm.
And it's really like freedom in the sense of the market. We've talked about this
Yes.
before.
Mm.
So it's not freedom of like, free individuals that can just walk around and do whatever they please. It's not upholding the ideas of individual freedom that you would get from like if you talk to anarchists or something like that.
Mm.
This is the freedom of people to operate in the marketplace
Mm.
and operate then by extension as equals in that marketplace so they can come together and trade and exchange and provide one another service on an even playing field. And
Mm.
they do that by being secure in what they
Mm.
can do. And that security comes from the sense that they can own and control their own property, being private
Yes.
property. And so the I guess the relationship, the circulation that happens between those three elements is what comes together to make and give us classical liberal thought. So classical liberal economics is
Mm.
kind of the origin of where we get neoliberalism coming from that. But like a lot of these ideas, these liberal ideas,
Mm.
were based around these simple kind of facts that, okay, society has to operate at some form as a coming together of people so they can benefit by being in the presence of all. Humans don't
Mm.
exist naturally in exclusion. They don't exist on their own. You have to come together and cooperate with other people in some form. You have to be social in some form. And so hence the idea of the social contract.
Yes.
So people come together and because they're dealing with each other and all that sort of stuff, they allow their certain liberties to be sacrificed, let's say,
Yes.
in order to really exist and coexist with other people and not encroach on other people's liberties.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is the part of the social contract is allowing part of your individual sovereignty to be given up to a higher power, being a government or the state, and allowing them to regulate your life in order or in exchange for some type of security. So you will abide by certain laws and abide by certain rules and regulations on the provision that the state will provide certain services.
Yes.
So usually then the most typical one of those is security from an external enemy. So you would, pay your taxes to the state, or you would abide by the state's rules because they're going to protect you from outside invasion. So your liberty, your general liberty, is upheld because you're being protected by the state. And so you have kind of encroachments on your liberal being, as long as they are for the means of protecting you and your private property, actually, really. And that's where you get police forces coming in.
Yes.
So that you can exist in this liberal and this free world. But, there's certain sacrifices you have to make. And then also to live with other people, there's sacrifices that need to be made amongst individuals. So like, I can't kill you for AS because that would be an invasion of your liberty and your freedoms. So you can exist and you should be able to move and exist as freely as possible in a liberal society, as long as you are not encroaching on somebody else's freedoms, be that, their freedom to exist without fear of harm, to, freedom of speech and their freedom of association with other people. You shouldn't be blocking other people and stopping their freedoms. The classic, like, line, my freedom stops where somebody else's begins, kind of thing. Yes. There's that pushing of the boundaries at like the edge of where people exist in the same space as one another. So liberal, I think, ideology and political economy comes down to this interplay between sacrifices on certain liberties to uphold others, which are seen to be central figures. And at its core, because we could just talk about neoliberalism for hours, but at its core, that's where neoliberalism starts to change the game. It's a perversion. It's nefarious in a way, because at least these liberal ideas are based on some form of, principle of general well-being.
Yes.
There's an intention there that, this is for the good of all, not for the lucky few that get to control the system or have the means. There is this sense that everyone should be able to enjoy this. And Adam Smith was all for that.
Yeah.
The Wealth of Nations was really about, making sure or painting a picture of this perfect utopian kind of capitalist world where people could exist freely and were equals and all of these things. But, whether or not that came to being is what we debate about all the time. But neoliberalism has got nothing to do with these kind of utopian ideals where people can actually exist and be free. It's got nothing to do with that.